Mr. Mainas, reading the Strategic Risk Analysis report of 2020 and 2022, one of the first things that stood out to me was the increased frequency in the term climate in this report. In 2020, it had only been mentioned 13 times. In the 2022 report, this number had increased to 64. Could you explain, please, some of the factors that account for the increase in this frequency and why perhaps it hadn't been mentioned as much before?
First of all, let me start by saying that Frontex work on strategic foresight with the Strategic Risk Analysis 2020 started as a result of the creation of the new multi-annual strategic policy cycle on integrated border management. And in this framework, we conducted an extensive literature review and a megatrend implications assessment in order to identify 30 challenges for European integrated border management. And from the very beginning, climate change stood out as one of the most important global challenges. In the Strategic Risk Analysis 2020, the focus was on all 14 megatrends. So, and we included also a chapter on pandemics. In that sense, we had limited space to cover climate change more fully. Nonetheless, the qualitative assessment resulted in some strong findings. If I remember well, our assessment on climate change was that climate change will be one of the defining elements for the future for humanity. And for sure, it will create additional problems to those who are already vulnerable and deprived. In the Strategic Risk Analysis 2022, 2 years after, we decided to prioritize the megatrends, and we focused on 6 of them. One of them, of course, was climate change, and so we provided more space to the analysis on climate change, and that explains the discrepancy between the mentions on strategic foresight in the 2020 and 2022 report. So this is why, and I think the key takeaway here is that climate change, right from the beginning, was identified in our strategic foresight report of 2020 as one of the most important global challenges. And of course, the 2022 update allowed us to look into it more carefully.
Frontex is inherently a reactive body. It is a border guard. It addresses issues as they arise on the border rather than preventing them. Could you explain, please, for a more broader policy-focused answer, what the EU could be doing to better address the root causes of climate-induced migration?
This is an important policy-related question, a question that hinges on international cooperation and how humanity goes about addressing the root causes of phenomena. Obviously, an agency like Frontex can do a lot at the external borders, but despite our reactive and proactive responses, we are not dealing with the fundamental causal factors behind the phenomena of migration and other problems like transnational crime, for instance, or terrorism, for that matter. So in the policy domain of migration and border management, I think the new multi-annual strategic policy cycle on European integrated border management offers excellent opportunity to the EU to identify strategic objectives and formulate policy and implement operational responses, engaging not only Frontex but also other EU bodies and institutions. Definitely there is a need for international cooperation to solve the big problems of the world. As you know, the United Nations 2030 Agenda involves 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One of them, number 13, is climate change. So these major issues and progress to achieve the goals is currently off track. This is a worrisome development, and this is what I want to point attention to. that the whole international community, all countries of the world, need to look carefully at the problem and try to address it.
There's been a lot of talk today about the status of climate refugees and whether there should be legal recognition of this status. Is this legal status you see occurring sometime in the short to medium term? And if so, what are some of the risks and challenges that this poses for Frontex?
That's another important and policy-related question. Obviously, the world is changing fast, and there's a need for policy responses at international level. During the conference, we heard a lot of speakers identifying the problems, the legal side, the legal dimension being one of them that needs attention. I know that UNHCR does not endorse the climate refugee term, speaking instead of climate-induced migrants and migration. People who are forced to displace internally due to disastrous climatic catastrophes. Obviously, that increases the fact that at present there's a legal void, increases the vulnerability of the status of these climate-induced migrants. So I think that again, it is a matter for the international community to consider carefully the options and perhaps agree a common legal position, a common legal definition in order to deal with the problem, which is obviously one of the emerging global challenges. As the climate change leads to a more frequent occurrence of extreme weather phenomena around the world and creates problems especially to the low-income countries around the world in the tropical, arid and temperate climatic zones. Obviously, more and more people will be forced to move within their own countries to other neighboring countries regionally, but also we might start seeing international migratory flows, one of the possible causes being climate change and disasters. Here we have a problem, another problem to contend with is the problem of multi-causality. How to disentangle the causal factors behind the movements of people across border from this environment where there is a multitude of factors or variables at play. So this is an important issue to consider because it carries policy as well as practical implications for the migrants themselves, for the receiving countries and for the host communities. At some point, evidence will be required and a legal interpretation. That's obviously in order to assess whether somebody meets the legal criteria, assuming that legal definition will be achieved at some point, and climate migrants will be entitled to international protection. There will be a need to assess and verify the status, disentangle it from other causal factors. It's not an easy issue. Another issue is that certain countries might be reluctant to recognize the status of climate migrants as such, or worse, instrumentalize or weaponize climate change and climate-induced migration for their own political reasons. Also, one cannot exclude the possibility that others who are not entitled, who will not be entitled to the legal status of climate migrant, would like to benefit from international protection. So we might have criminal actors, but also economic migrants who will try to benefit from this. Besides those legal challenges, practical challenges and potential issues that might be faced in practice, one thing is certain, that climate change is accelerating. We have an extreme, we observe an extreme occurrence of phenomena that increases the number of people on the move forced due to climatic phenomena. And obviously climate-induced migration emerges as one of the global challenges of our times.